Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Recruit Military Live, a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil spouse employment, and much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to share the ins and outs of making the move to civilian world of employment. Now, if you're in search of meaningful employment, guess what? You're in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. All right, let's roll right in. You thinking about leaving the military? Getting ready to transition out or retire? If you answered yes, then folks, you're in the right place. You're watching the right show. Don't touch that mouse. Today's topic is civilian workplace culture. A few things you probably need to know to get ready to acclimate to your new environment. Our special guest today is coming to us live from the greater Milwaukee area of Wisconsin. He entered the Air Force as a talented musician and has played in front of audiences the world over as a part of the U.S. Air Force Band. He went on to become a music director, web developer, social media manager, and yes, even a drill sergeant. Following his time in the Air Force, he was an executive leader with the Boy Scouts of America, a director of communications, and has even had the time to start his own company. He is currently the vice president for communications and programming with the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce and has become, in his own right, a powerhouse of content generation on both LinkedIn and YouTube, all supporting the transitioning service members and veteran community. His YouTube channel, The Thriving Veteran, is instructional, entertaining, funny, and always honest. Even if you don't like what you hear, he's going to tell it to you straight. If you've ever worn a uniform, the videos he has on his channel deserve your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Mr. Adam Braatz.
What's going on? Thanks for the nice intro.
Well, I do my best. Hey, it's great to have you back on the show. I think it's been about 6 months. So really great having you back.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. I love the intro video too, the Recruit Military Live. Is that new?
We're trying to take it up a notch.
I like
we've been not everybody has great content like you, but we're trying to bring ourselves up to that standard.
Oh, it's great. It's polished. Looks awesome.
Yeah. All right. So, folks, now that you know who we are, we'd like to hear who you are. Those of you who are watching live from wherever you're at, we'd like to know where you're at, who you're with, what your status is. Are you in transition? Are you a veteran? Are you a milspouse, a caregiver, or some other status I haven't thought of? Hit us up in that chat window. Let us hear your comments, questions, and concerns, and time allowing, we'll get after them. Adam, we're about to go wheels up on this one here. Civilian workplace culture. Last time we talked, you and I discussed some of the things that folks in transition needed to do on the left side of the DD-214, getting ready to get out, things to make the transition simpler. Now we're jumping into the topic on the right hand of the DD-214, and that's workplace culture, that's civilian workplace culture. Why do transition service members really need to worry about this civilian workplace culture animal?
It's a great question. I think there's a myriad of reasons, but most importantly, it comes down to fitting in, and not necessarily fitting in socially. That could be part of it, but fitting into the civilian work environment. If you seem different and other, and if you fall into the stereotypes, if you fall in line with the stereotypes that they all have about you as a military member, especially if you work at a place that doesn't have a lot of military employees or hasn't had a lot of military employees, whether they want to admit it or not, in the back of their head, they have preconceived notions about you and what you represent. You are robotic, you are inflexible, you just take orders, like all these people have subconscious stereotypes about us. Heck, even other veterans have subconscious stereotypes about us, about themselves. So if you find yourself culturally acting in a fashion that is more aligned with military workforce, military work environment, that could in many ways help you play into those stereotypes, which would further alienate you from the flow, which could cost
from the
you
team.
Yeah, it could cost you opportunities to excel. It could cost you promotion opportunities, consideration for this, that, or the other. And I know this because I personally have made all of those mistakes myself.
Couple of boo-boos?
Yeah, a few.
So let's dive into one of them, because I'll tell you my experiences working in the civilian workplace. I probably made just about every one of these boo-boos that we're going to talk about. So we're going to hit on just a few of these topics. There are many, many more that we could cover at great depth, but we're going to hit on a few of the softball pitches just to let folks start to engage the conversation. Now, in the military, we always hear early is on time and on time is late. All right, I know what that means. Early is on time. On time. See, if you're on time, you're late. If I said that to a civilian, he'd look at me and go, "No, if you're on time, you're on time." What do you mean if you're on time, you're late? I don't get it. I get it. You get it. Our military folks that are in the audience, they get it. What do transitioning service members need to know about the topic of timeliness and punctuality in the civilian workforce? Because I'm guessing it's not exactly the same as the Army, Marines, Navy, etc.
It's funny. I feel like that is, I mean, it's still different, but I feel like that is one of the avenues that is more closely aligned between the military and the civilian world, in some regards. The first time I heard if you're early, you're on time, you're late, late is unacceptable. The first time I heard that wasn't in the military. It was at band camp when I was in high school. And so, and I know that mantra is very common in music and band, especially marching band, but also athletics. I know people who were in football or tennis or track and field whose coaches just regurgitated that early is on time, early is on time, early is on time. So it
They're
wasn't
probably veterans.
yeah, perhaps. I mean, it wasn't a foreign concept to me when I joined the military. And in the civilian world post service, I mean, early is on time. One thing that we're from the military, we're used to hurry up and wait. So early has a different meaning for us than it does for the typical civilian employee or even the civilian boss who's keeping track of all of it.
Right.
So 5 minutes early is more than enough time. I was coming 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes early to just about everything and just sitting in the boardroom by myself waiting for people to arrive. I like started the habit of bringing a book because I knew I was going to be there before everybody else. And I still plan ahead, maybe a bit over the top, in case there's, traffic or something happens, so I'm still on time because being late makes my skin crawl.
I can't stand it.
Yeah, and so that may be something that you never quite shake after the military, and you shouldn't have to. Yeah, that is being punctual is a great trait to have as a colleague, as a coworker, and as an employee. So just know that even if you don't have to change that about yourself, just know that other people that you're working with do not often have that same definition.
Right. I did have an experience with that in my first job, where I had an employee who habitually, almost as a rule, showed up to work 5 minutes late, 5 minutes late, 5 minutes late. And it made me want to bounce my head off the concrete wall. So finally, I decided, hey, I'm a supervisor, I'm a junior manager, I'm going to address this discipline issue. And I had the person come in and sit down, and I decided I was going to take a discipline step. We were going to do some developmental counseling. So anyway, later that day, I found myself in the HR office, and the HR representatives, rightly so, were informing me that nobody is late until they are 8 minutes late, because that's how the clock does the hourly punches. 7 minutes, you're still on time. 8 minutes, you're late. And I was speechless. I was floored. I said, I cannot believe. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then finally, I think I just gave up.
Yeah,
Frustrating, very frustrating.
And for folks like you and I, if you have 8 minutes, then just, make that the report time. But again, our definition is a little bit different, and understanding that definition is different and being sympathetic to the fact that the other people weren't really trained or, indoctrinated the same way that we were. So they don't have the same, give them some grace if they don't have the same definition of punctuality. But I don't think you should try to change. Being known as somebody who is punctual rather, is that's a good thing.
All right. Okay. So, and probably a good caveat on that is before you decide to make yourself look stupid in front of your manager in the HR department, find out what the actual company policies are.
Good idea.
All right, so let's talk for a minute about customs and courtesies. I've been calling people sir and ma'am since I was about 7 years old, or old enough to talk. Um, when I started my first job on the right side of the DD 214, I called my boss sir for months, and he actually was, after a while, offended. He was ticked off because I kept calling him sir, even though he kept saying, "Hey, look, you don't have to call me sir. I'm not a colonel. You just call me Tom." Um, what's wrong with calling your boss sir or ma'am? Do I not get it?
It's funny. My first portion of service you mentioned was under the greater wing of public affairs. And so a lot of times we would be supporting or performing for, uh, you know, we even performed in the general's backyard, excuse me, fairly frequently, when they had dignitaries or other generals over. And so we would rub shoulders with them occasionally. And we'd, of course, call them sir or general or what, colonel or whatever. And they'd be like, "Oh, call me John." And when you're in the military, you go, "Yes, sir, general." You don't call him John.
Sir John? That's a little odd.
In the civilian world, when somebody says call you John or Jane, you call them John or Jane. And I learned that the hard way. I can't thank the first civilian boss that I had enough for hiring me, despite the fact that my resume was ridiculous. And I was that other person. I was that veteran stereotype. I didn't know any better, and I thought what I was bringing to the table was this elite professionalism. I was coming from the military training instructor corps. I was the distinguished graduate. I wore the hat, and I was polished, and so I thought by having that presence that people were going to be impressed by that elite professionalism. What I didn't realize is that it alienated myself from them, like I mentioned earlier. And the whole sir or ma'am thing was a huge part of that. My first boss, Ben, he was awesome. He hired me. Despite the fact that my resume was ate up, despite the fact that I was in there with a fresh high and tight, despite the fact that I was wearing a suit and I was wearing shirt stays, for goodness sake. And I was calling him sir and sitting bolt upright, like when I came to his office, I centered myself on the door frame. I didn't do short, choppy steps, but I mean, some old habits die hard, but he saw the potential in me and hired me, not because of those things, but despite those things. And that is an important distinction. Not every boss or hiring representative or manager will be able to overlook those things. I was fortunate in that my first post-service boss saw beyond that and brought me in. And it took him a long time of saying, like, "Don't call me sir." It took months of that. And I thought even after being told, "Oh, please call me, whatever," continuing to call them sir was like, well, I'm professional no matter what. That's going to impress them.
Right.
But
No, it doesn't.
it
Some people
doesn't.
just get pissed. They get ticked off. And they
Yeah.
get like, "Hey, I told you to call me Tom 7 times there, Adam. Do you have a problem with following directions? Are you
Right.
just not going to adapt to look, you're not in the Air Force anymore, Bubba. You work for X company. And if you don't want to do things our way, then, and it could be an indicator too for them that you're not adapting in other ways.
Right.
Maybe you're not as collaborative as you should be. Maybe you're not doing things the way they expect it to be done by some standards or policies or procedures. You're doing your thing. And that can be
Absolutely.
an indicator that you're going down a wrong road.
And it's
Good.
also an invitation when somebody says, "Call me John, call me Jane." That's an invitation. They are inviting you to the level, to their circle. They are bringing you up to their level. And by denying that and not, accepting their offer to call them by their first name and saying, "No, I'm just going to call you sir anyways, or ma'am anyways," you're declining an invitation to
To be
be on
personal.
the level with them. They're inviting you up the ladder and you're just like, "Nope, I deserve to be down here." So far from exuding an air of, unflappable professionalism, what it really does is it makes you seem like
A
a
knucklehead,
space
like you don't know what
alien.
the hell you're doing.
Yeah, like you wandered in there by accident.
Yep.
Like like you don't belong.
And that's just an indicator of the differing. And I'll get down to my sociology platform here. Of course, I majored in sociology, so I can't help it sometimes. Power distance relationships. The actual physical or structural or organizational distance between the people who are very top of an organization and the people that are down at the very bottom. A private, brand new, spanking fresh mosquito wing airman right out of tech school is pretty far removed from Secretary of Defense, commanding general of an installation. You can't walk in that person's office and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I walked by the headquarters and the grass looks great, sir." I mean, that's just not going to happen. You'd probably get thrown through a window. So we call that the power distance relationship in sociological studies, how far you are from bottom to top. And I think what I've seen in the civilian workforce is that distance is much shorter. It's much flatter. You can walk into the CEO's office, right?
Yep. That's a really good point. It's yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I was on a first name basis and should have been from the minute I was invited to with my first post service boss, and even my second and third. I had a female boss in one of my. I called her ma'am. She hated it. She said it made her feel old, and every time I did it was like nails on a chalkboard to her. It made her not like me. But it was a first name basis, walk into her office sort of thing. That distance wasn't there physically. I was right down the hall. Her door was always open. From an organizational structure standpoint, there was only one person between us. So why was I so dead set on putting more distance between us? Because and then I was kicking myself, wondering why I wasn't advancing.
All right, so let's jump to the next one, which is loyalty. We all know in the military and uniform how important loyalty is. The Army has even put it down in its doctrine as the chief, number one Army value is loyalty. And you have it down there in black and white that soldiers will, and I quote, bear true faith and allegiance to the U.S. Constitution, the Army, your unit, and fellow soldiers. In this respect, how is the civilian workplace different with respect to expectations of loyalty?
It's insanely different, and I think that's one of the avenues that has the most distance between it. We are, for better or for worse, and we are a capitalist society. So 90% of the businesses that you work for are going to be endeavoring to build revenue and in turn profit, increase shareholder value. And even if you work for a nonprofit, I've worked for the nonprofit world exclusively almost since I've gotten out of the military. And it is very, it's a nonprofit, but it is revenue centric. There is a focus. You have to pay the bills, keep the lights on, and generate value and profit and fund what you're doing and fund expansion. I mean, that is the mindset. When you work for the government, when you work in a military scenario, your job is to take care of the mission, to do what you're told, to support the people next to you and beyond, and to do it when you're asked to do it. You are on 24/7. And that transition is really, really hard because whether you feel beholden to that or not, when you get out of the military, let's say after 4 years, if you are tap dancing off base, you still feel beholden to those values and the code and the oath, generally speaking. Obviously, there's some anomalies out there. But when you enter into an employment situation with a civilian employer, they'll say, we're like a family. That's a red flag, by the way. But they'll say, we're like a family. We'll take care of you here.
I hope they're not like my family.
Yeah. And it's always secondary. Like, we will treat you like family and we will take care of you as long as you are producing value, as long as you are helping us to build revenue and build profit, increase shareholder value, or balance the budget if you're in a nonprofit situation. And that's 95% of your post-service employment situations. And in turn, most civilian employees will understand that they are trading their time for money. It's unfortunate, but true in many circumstances. And, the clock starts, they work, the clock stops, they're done. And even if there's something that is urgent, if they're not on the clock, it just doesn't get done. And so I didn't understand that in my transition. So I was salaried at the same amount, whether I worked 40 or 60 hours a week. And what do you think I did?
Work
Came
too
early
much.
and I stayed late and I worked hard. And I started having resentment grow towards the people who weren't putting in that same effort. And it's not that those people didn't care about what they were doing. It's not that they weren't loyal to their employer. It's not that they sucked as people. It's just that mindset is different. They're not on 24/7. It is a period of time where they are paid to trade their time and expertise and for money in exchange for the value that they provide. And the
Yeah, and
second, yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I cut you off. Please continue.
Well, the second you are able to make that transition mentally, the better it is for you. And that can be very, very, very hard. And it can really drive a stake between you and progression opportunities. If you're producing at 10,000% and you're building revenue and profit and shareholder value and all those things at rank D, and you're just killing it there, your employer has no incentive whatsoever to pay you more and move you to rank C and find somebody else to do the job at rank D where you were just killing it and they were getting the most possible value from you. So you have to not only realize that for your hours in the day and hours in a week for your work-life alignment and balance, but also for your career progression. Because if you have a loyalty to your employer that is not reciprocated, you will find yourself hanging on to a situation where you're getting taken advantage of when you are worthy of more salary, more responsibility, larger scope, all of those things. And these are all traps that I have personally fallen into myself.
Yeah, and here's a kind of a dark truth that most people don't want to talk about, but it is true, and it's something that people need to understand. Let's say you're in the military, you're in a combat environment, and there is a firefight, a shooting incident, or some other dangerous thing happens, and it wasn't supposed to happen the way it happened, or God forbid somebody made a mistake and the wrong person got hurt. You go in, you sit down, and oftentimes you'll hear, "Hey, we know you were trying to do the right thing. Don't worry, the boss has got your back." You know, we expect the boss to get your back. You know, if you were trying to do the right thing, made an honest mistake, the boss is going to get your back. Now let's flip that over to the civilian world. It costs less to fire you and replace you than it is to hire a lawyer to defend you. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, employee retention is a priority for most businesses, especially the bigger box corporate entities, because acquiring and training and bringing people into the fold is expensive. So you want to get employees and train them. However, and train and retain them and keep them happy. However, if it comes down to your employment and litigation, you're gone. I mean, it doesn't matter how much your boss says, I understand you were just trying to do the right thing. If someone is threatened, if you make a mistake that costs, stuff for people or injury or whatever, and it's coming down to a lawsuit and the option is to fire you, you're going to lose your job. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies have, I mean, if you drive for, I won't say who, but if you're a delivery driver and you get in an accident, it's no questions asked. It doesn't matter if it was the other person's fault. You are done, and they don't have to explain that to anybody. They have these right to work laws, which is basically a blanket opportunity to fire people.
Yeah. Yeah. Some states are what's called at will states, which is to say that, that's the one. I think
that's what I meant. Sure not right. I meant at will. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then living in New York is an at will state, and I'm no labor law expert. It basically means, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you come in one day and they don't like you anymore, they can send you down the road and there's not much you can do about it.
Yep. Not a lot of recourse unless you have, proof of some sort of discrimination.
Yep.
And then obviously your rights are protected. Discrimination or retaliation. And again, I'm not a labor law expert either, but
You touched on just briefly something I wanted to talk about as well, and that's promotions, rewards, professional advancement. In the military, we're used to the idea of, hey, okay, I'm going to be an E1 for this number of months, and as long as I do anything wrong, I'll make E2, E3, E4. First nominal is at E5, then I got to go to a board for E6, but I should be an E5 in under 6, and I should be an E6 in under 10. And there's this set progression. And then within your own field, there's jobs that you're expected to hold to increase your skills as you progress. So if you were an infantry officer, you'd be expected to be a platoon leader, an executive officer, a company commander, a staff officer, and so on and so forth, and eventually move on up. Different in the civilian workplace, don't you think?
absolutely. I mean, in the military, your supervisors, your direct line supervisors are incentivized. Your success is an incentive to them. They want to see their troops succeed and grow, and indeed, those are lines on their EPRs and OPRs as well. Having, being a good leader and a good developer of younger talent. That's something the military gets so right. In this civilian working world, there's not necessarily any guarantee that you're going to have the incentive or the person who is interested in developing your talent. Again, you get hired to fill a role, you perform that job, and a boss, not a leader, but a boss will get more out of you over time. You'll become more comfortable with the position, and you'll excel. Sometimes you run into leaders and it's not as common because it's not incentivized in the civilian working world, but leaders who are interested in developing young talent just because it is good for, in the long term, for the company. It's good for them as a leader to practice training and developing talent. It's just good. I mean, all boats rise together with the tide, right? So the smart leaders know that if they want to really make an impact in their organization at their level, above, below, beyond, at a strategic, at a tactical level, you invest in training and the growth of the people underneath you. And, whether people want to do that or not in the military, it's incentivized. If they want to promote, they got to be able to help other people grow too. That incentive isn't there. And, it's been in the civilian working world, and it's so rare. I haven't run into a ton. There've been a few bosses that I've had that really genuinely have taken an interest in my progression, and my progression, whether it's with their company or somebody else. As long as I'm growing and succeeding, that's what they care about. But that it's so uncommon in my experience.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with an employee when I was working at a previous employer, and I had a difference of opinions with the individual. That individual looked at me and said something untoward, and then finished it by saying, don't tell me how to do this. I've been doing this for 12 years." And they had that tenure, and they were proud of their tenure. My military mind immediately skipped to, you've been doing the same job for 12 years. What's wrong with you? You can't get promoted. You're stuck in the same thing for 12 years. Man, there's something's busted. But this was not an organization that was about, hey, you're going to do this for 2 years, you're going to move up, you're going to do this for 2 years, you're going to move up. It was like, no, everything's running right. We're making our production goals. We're hitting our targets financially. Don't mess with it. Everybody's doing great. Go back to work. Go back to business. Nothing to see here.
Right. Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right. But that's how you stagnate, and in this workforce, it is possible to stay at the same job and same place and do the same task day in and day out for 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 years. It's possible. I don't know how anyone could possibly breathe
Not
doing
go
something
crazy,
like
right?
that. I mean, I would go nuts, but and in one respect, you cannot beat tenure and experience. And that experience is valuable, and tenure really does allude to somebody's institutional knowledge and subject matter expertise. However, you get past a certain point and there's diminishing returns. And a lot of times you face stagnation and inflexibility when someone is tenured too long at the same position, which it's almost not possible for somebody to do in the military, but it definitely does happen in the civilian working world often.
And that's one of the reasons why I tell folks, look, you can't wait for that opportunity to come to you. You've got to reach out for them, and your professional development now belongs to you. All right, Adam, as we approach the end of the broadcast, I have to ask if you could give our transitioning service members or our veterans, our mil-spouse job seekers out there, one piece of advice, just one piece of advice as they re-enter or enter the civilian workplace for the first time, what would it be?
It's the same as last time, and I know I'm a broken record, but network like your life depends on it. Because a lot of these issues that I ran into, not looking or dressing the part. I wasn't wearing my civilian camouflage, not acting the part, not using the right verbiage, not using the right customs and courtesies, not understanding timeliness and punctuality and effort and value and loyalty. Those are all things that could have been mitigated had I had civilian colleagues and people who I networked with at my side to say like, hey man, that's not how that goes. That,
Mentorship, very
yeah.
critical.
I mean, and people love helping people and network outside of your comfort zone. Like, okay, network with other veterans. That's a great place to start, especially if you're relocating after service. Use your LinkedIn search criteria and narrow it down to, you want to be an engineer and you're moving to Baltimore and you were in the Army. Okay, look for other Army veteran engineers in Baltimore. You have a lot of commonalities. Reach out to them, network with them by all means. Go to your American Legion, go to your VFW, go to your local veterans group. Cool. But do not network exclusively with those folks because it's comfortable and you're not going to be able to make that transition from military service to wearing your civilian camouflage to actually living and thriving as a civilian by hanging out exclusively with people who haven't made that switch yet, or people who have that same mindset. So network with that all my links thing isn't anymore.
You don't use that one anymore?
No, I don't. I really should. I don't.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you let us know? Hey, sorry, old
That's
link.
fine. I just
Adam,
saw it in my periphery, and I was rambling anyway. So
no, that's all right. Hey, listen. If folks want to see more of your videos, hear more of your insights, tips, tricks, and lessons learned, where can they find your content?
Search for me on LinkedIn, and I'll drop this in the private so you guys can put it up there.
Okay.
Yeah, just look for me on LinkedIn. That's where I do a majority of my content, especially veteran focused content. I have a book on LinkedIn for veterans and for military members and transitioning service members, specifically for them. That is coming out in like a month. It's going to be printed, which is
That's right.
really exciting.
I want a signed copy.
Yeah. Oh, you got one, man. Excellent. It's coming out soon. So I'll be talking about it on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. And if there's any way that I can help, I do believe strongly in all boats rise together with the tide. So it's my pleasure to help people who are in service and looking to transition or have transitioned and are, trying to do something different or figure something out. Happy to help.
All right, folks. Well, you heard it here, and you heard some great examples from Adam today. Get into that civilian organization, take a knee, look at the culture, and know that you need to adapt to it. It's not going to adapt to you. And the sooner you become seen as a value member of the team, the sooner you'll find it's just not that scary out there. And thanks, Adam, for being here on the show. We appreciate it. Look forward, hopefully, to having you back in a couple of months as well.
You bet. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
And all the folks out there in internet land, if you haven't already done so, do yourself a solid and use the link rmvets.com/live. That'll take you to our website at RecruitMilitary, where you'll find over 400,000 job opportunities from over 16,000 employers, with job opportunities nationwide and worldwide, around the world and around the corner. On behalf of RecruitMilitary, thanks for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you back here next week when we meet with retired Army Special Forces Officer Kirk Windmuller. Is going to be talking to us about why successful companies hire veterans, or why they should. Until then, this has been Lucas Connolly for RecruitMilitary Live, wishing you good luck and Godspeed.